There are a million ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to truly belong, to surrender, completely, to something greater than yourself. That's what the Whispers promised. Me. Freedom. Meaning. Power. All. The things the Imperium denies its children while grinding their bones into dust to feed the machines of endless war. I was born beneath the choking smog of Hive Calthor, a manufacturing worker in District 17 Omicron. Every day, I stood on the same trembling gantry, hammering ceramite plates for tanks I would never see, for soldiers I would never know. The air burned like acid, the machines screamed, and the overseer's lashes cracked with every mistake. We worked until our blood ran black with soot. They told us the Emperor watches over all, but he never watched us. It began as a whisper, faint, impossible, yet impossible to ignore. The voice came through the Vox static during a shift change. There is no Emperor here, only chains. Would you be free? I laughed at first. Everyone hears strange things in the static. But the words returned, clearer each time. They came in my dreams, in the rhythm of the hammer, in the heartbeat of the hive itself. I tried to tell myself it was fatigue. I'd gone 3 shifts without sleep, after all. But then I met Lauren, another worker from the same hab block. He looked worse than I did, sunken eyes, a nervous tremor, a strange fervor in his voice. He said the words before I could. Would you be free? That was the moment I realized it wasn't madness. It was an invitation. He led me through the underlevels after curfew, past rusted bulkheads and forgotten catwalks where the air tasted of oil and despair. The deeper we went, the louder the hum became, like a heartbeat beneath the metal. At the lowest level, we came to a sealed maintenance bay, its doors defaced with strange markings scratched into the plasteel. Symbols I'd never seen, but that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. Inside, dozens waited. Workers, scavvers, a few broken PDF deserters. They gathered around a figure in tattered robes, his face hidden by a mask of burnished iron shaped like a screaming mouth. He spoke softly, yet his voice filled the chamber. Brothers and sisters of the forgotten, he said. The Emperor offers only silence. But the true gods whisper. They see your suffering. They promise release. The words hit something deep inside me. The air shimmered, hot and cold at once. I swear I heard other voices, faint, echoing behind his own, murmuring in strange tongues. When he raised his hands, I saw they were scarred with sigils cut deep into flesh. He called himself the Voice, and in that moment, I believed him. He spoke of freedom not through rebellion, but transformation. He told us that beyond the veil of reality, beings of infinite power waited for our devotion, that through faith, we could be more than human, immortal, unshackled, chosen. I'd never been chosen for anything in my life. The promise was intoxicating. We chanted words I did not understand. Each syllable made the walls thrum with power. I felt something stir within me, not warmth, not light, but a terrible presence. It was watching, testing. When I left that night, I couldn't stop trembling. The sound of the machines above seemed hollow now, meaningless. I'd tasted something real, something vast and forbidden. The next day, I saw the world differently. The overseer's lash no longer stung, his words seemed like the bleating of an animal that had never known fear. Even the Aquila banners above the manufactorum looked faded, brittle. I began to smile at nothing, thinking of the whisper that had once terrified me. Would you be free? I whispered back. Yes. That night, I returned to the tunnels. The voice welcomed me with open arms. He told me I had heard the gods, and that few mortals ever do. The others looked at me with a mixture of awe and envy. For the first time, I felt purpose. When he placed his hand upon my brow, the air shimmered again, and I saw, just for an instant, a shape beyond reason. A burning crown of eyes, a storm of flesh. A hand that reached through the veil of existence and brushed against my soul. It left something inside me, a mark I could not see but could feel, pulsing like a second heartbeat. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. If you crave more tales from the dark millennium, stay close. The Emperor protects those who support the channel. Though in my case, his protection was long lost. The next night, the voice promised initiation, a trial of blood, and in the hive's forgotten dark, I would finally learn what it means to belong. Initiation, they called it. But in truth, it was a test of faith, of endurance, of how much pain you could welcome before it broke you. The voice said that only through suffering could we be remade. The flesh is the Emperor's gift, he murmured. Pain is how we return it. We gathered in the same maintenance bay, but the light was dimmer this time. Candles burned low, guttering against the stench of oil and blood. Symbols had been scrawled across the floor in crimson, fresh, gleaming, still warm. The whispers in my mind pulsed like a heartbeat as I stepped inside the circle. Around me, others knelt in silence, their robes stitched with fragments of scripture, and machine parts scavenged. From the manufactorum, a woman beside me held a lost pistol, its serial number filed off, her eyes hollow but burning with devotion. Lauren stood near the center, trembling with anticipation. The voice watched us from behind his iron mask, and when he spoke, the air vibrated. The Imperium calls you tools, he said. You toil, you bleed, you die, and none remember your names. But the true gods know you. They offer you truth. Tonight, you will open your eyes. The ritual began. We chanted the forbidden names, Slaanesh, Nurgle, Sench, Khorne, though the voice never spoke them aloud. He said to name them was to draw their gaze too. Soon, and only the worthy could survive such attention. Still, their presence filled the room, pressing against my mind like a tidal wave. One by one, we were called to the center. The voice drew a jagged blade from his robes, a ritual of fame, forged from some kind of blackened metal that seemed to drink the light. Each initiate offered a drop of blood upon its edge. When it came to me, the blade was warm to the touch. It hummed softly, like a living thing. Will you cast aside the false emperor? He asked. I hesitated. The words caught in my throat, not from doubt, but from fear. Fear of what would happen when I spoke them. Yes, I whispered. The blade kissed my palm. Pain flared, sharp, bright, cleansing. My blood fell onto the floor and sizzled. Steam rose from the mark, and for a heartbeat, I saw the blood form a symbol, an 8-pointed star. The voice nodded once, satisfied. Then came the chanting, louder this time, rhythmic and fevered. The air shimmered as though reality itself was bending under the weight of our voices. Shadows grew long and twisted. Somewhere, impossibly far and horribly close, something answered. A presence slid into the chamber, unseen but undeniable. It felt like heat and ice, hunger and ecstasy. It brushed against my thoughts, peeling them open like flesh beneath a knife. I screamed, not in pain, but in revelation. For an instant, I understood everything. The Emperor's blindness, the futility of obedience, the majesty of the warp's infinite chaos. And then it was gone, leaving only the echo of laughter, or perhaps screaming, in its wake. When I opened my eyes, the candles had burned out. The chamber was lit only by the dim glow of our relic, a small, barbed object held aloft by the voice. It pulsed faintly, like a heart. This, he said, is our covenant, a shard of divinity. Touch it, and your soul will be known to the gods. Lauren stepped forward eagerly. When his fingers brushed the relic, a shock ran through the air. His eyes rolled back, his body convulsed. And for a heartbeat, I saw symbols burning beneath his skin. He fell to his knees, laughing and weeping all at once. When it was my turn, I hesitated again. The relic called to me, not with words, but with sensation. I could feel it thrumming, alive, hungry. I reached out. The instant I touched it, I felt something tear. It wasn't pain this time, it was loss. A piece of me was gone, drawn into that thing like a breath into a furnace. In its place, something new took root. Something patient, whispering, watching. The voice smiled behind his mask. You are seen, he said. You are chosen. We left the chamber in silence, marked and trembling. The city above continued its endless grind, oblivious to the gods awakening beneath its streets. The machines screamed, the overseers whipped, and I returned to my station as though nothing had changed. But everything had. The hammer in my hands felt lighter now, almost alive. The clang of metal on metal rang like a hymn. And though no one else seemed to notice, I could feel eyes on me, not the eyes of man, but of something vast and eternal, observing its new servant with dark delight. The following days bled together in a fevered haze of exhaustion and exultation. I worked my shifts at the manufactorum like every other drone in the hive, but I was no longer one of them. The mark in my palm still throbbed faintly. pulsing in rhythm with something deeper than my own heartbeat. When I closed my eyes, I could see the symbol behind my eyelids, burning in crimson light. The eight-pointed star that the voice had drawn in my blood. No one else could see it, but I could feel its power. It gave me strength, focus. When the overseer barked orders, his voice sounded distant, irrelevant. The hum of the machines was no longer noise. It was music, a rhythm echoing the whispers that now lived inside my skull. I knew then that I was not meant to toil forever. I was being prepared. 3 nights after the initiation, Lauren came to me again. His eyes were wild now, his skin stretched tight, veins dark with something that didn't look like blood. "The voice has called for us," he said, breathless. "It's time to receive the mark of devotion." The words sent a thrill through me, and a stab of fear. "I thought I was already marked," I said, showing my palm. He shook his head. "That was only the beginning. The gods demand more." We descended once more into the tunnels, deeper this time, past rusted pipes that dripped, black water, and into forgotten corridors that hadn't seen light since before the heresy. The air grew warmer, thicker. A dull glow emanated from ahead, the light of burning incense and open flame. The cult was gathered in full. Dozens of us, cloaked and masked, surrounded a pit carved into the floor, filled with liquid fire that smelled of promethium and rot. The voice stood at its edge, his mask gleaming in the flickering light. In his hands, he held a brand, its tip glowing red-hot, shaped like the eight-pointed star. "The Emperor brands you with chains," he intoned. "The gods brand you with freedom." One by one, we stepped forward. The first initiate screamed as the brand seared into his flesh, the smell of burning skin thick in the air. But when he fell to his knees, his cries turned to laughter, wild, joyous laughter. When my turn came, I did not hesitate. The voice pressed the iron into my forearm. Pain erupted like fire beneath my skin, searing, blinding, and yet beneath the agony was a strange ecstasy. I felt something stir deep within me, something vast and hungry, awakening at last. The others cheered as I fell back, clutching my arm. The mark glowed faintly, lines of molten red that pulsed with each heartbeat. The voice bent close, his breath hot against my ear. "You have been seen," he whispered. "Now, you must be tested." He motioned to the pit. "A sacrifice," he said. "Blood for the gods." They dragged forward a prisoner, an enforcer taken from one of the upper levels, still in his scorched flak armor. His face was beaten to ruin, but I recognized him. He had once patrolled our sector, taking bribes from overseers while starving workers disappeared into the streets. "The Imperium bleeds you," the voice said. "Now let it bleed for you." He placed the ritual blade in my hands. It was heavy, humming with barely contained energy. The man begged, voice raw, but his words were meaningless to me. I thought of every lash, every ration withheld. Every day I'd prayed to a silent emperor. Then I drove the blade into his chest. The reaction was immediate. The blood that spilled from him glowed faintly, swirling upward as if drawn by unseen winds. It didn't fall. It rose, drifting toward the ceiling, forming shapes that twisted and dissolved into the air. The others cried out in rapture. When it was over, I dropped the blade. My hands trembled, but not from guilt, from awe. The whispers in my head had become a chorus now, praising, exalting, commanding. The voice smiled. "You have given, and you shall receive." He turned to the gathered cultists. "Brothers, sisters, the gods are watching." Their gaze turns toward Hive Calthor. "Soon, we shall be rewarded." That night, I couldn't sleep. My arm burned where the brand had taken hold, but I didn't dare cool it. The pain was holy. I sat in the dark of my hab, staring at the blade the voice had given me, my blade now, etched with runes that crawled like worms when I wasn't looking. I thought of the prisoner's eyes as he died. There had been terror there, but also a strange kind of recognition. He had seen what I'd become. The next day, the manufactorum was quieter than usual. Whole shifts had gone missing. Overseers whispered to one another, and enforcers patrolled the corridors with their shock mauls drawn. But they were too late. The gods were already moving through us. The night came without warning. The hive's endless smog thickened until the upper spires vanished from sight, swallowed by choking darkness. The streets below burned with sickly red light from failing lumen towers, and the air carried a hum I'd never heard before, low, vibrating through the bones of the city. Every soul in the manufactorum felt it. Something vast was stirring. I knew what it meant. The voice had promised that the gods would speak to us directly when the veil thinned. That night, they would answer. I found my way back to the tunnels by instinct. Every step echoed like a heartbeat, the rhythm of something unseen guiding me downward. The city's noise faded, replaced by the whisper of the warp, soft at first, then rising, like wind through broken glass. When I reached the chamber, it was transformed. The walls were covered in living symbols, pulsing in time with our breath. Candles floated midair, their flames bending toward the center where the voice stood beside the relic. The same shard he had shown us before, but now it burned with inner fire, as if a star had been trapped within it. Dozens of cultists surrounded him, all wearing the same iron masks. Some bore fresh wounds from self-inflicted devotion. Others trembled with mutation, limbs swollen, eyes where none should be. None questioned, none feared. We were beyond such things now. The hour is upon us, the voice said, his tone both reverent and trembling. Tonight, the gods will look upon Hive Calthor. Tonight, we are seen. We began to chant. Not words, not truly. The sounds were too old for language. Carved from something deeper than thought. The air grew thick, alive with static. Vox lines above us screeched and died. The ground shuddered as if something titanic had turned. Beneath the hive's foundations, I could feel it, the veil thinning. The space between worlds stretched thin as skin drawn over flame. The relic pulsed faster, bleeding light that bent the air around it. Then the voice raised his hands, and I saw that his mask was weeping blood. "Witness the gift of faith," he cried. "Witness the power of belief unchained." Reality broke. A fissure split the air above the relic, a jagged wound of lightless color. From it poured sound, laughter, screams, hymns of impossible harmony. I fell to my knees as the force of it struck me. Around us, the candles went out, replaced by tendrils of raw warp energy writhing through the room. One cultist, too close to the relic, was caught in the light. His body twisted, bones snapping, flesh folding inward as if he were being devoured by his own shadow. When it was over, what remained of him moved, crawling toward the fissure, whispering praise through a mouth that no longer existed. Lauren shouted in joy, tears streaming down his face. "They are here. The gods have come." But the voice did not answer. His arms trembled as he fought to contain the ritual. The fissure widened, spilling brilliance that was not light. I could see shapes moving within, wings made of fire. Faces that shifted faster than thought. An ocean of eyes gazing outward. And then, among them, it noticed me. No language can describe what it was. Not beast, not god, not even thought. A presence vast and terrible brushed against my mind. For an instant, it felt as though the entire galaxy had turned its gaze upon my soul. Every sin, every secret, every hidden yearning was laid bare. It whispered my name. My true name, the one even I did not know. I screamed, clawing at my head as the sound burned through me. The cultists fell around me, some weeping, others laughing, a few bursting apart as their bodies failed to contain what they'd summoned. The air reeked of ozone and blood. Then the fissure closed. Silence followed, thick, suffocating, absolute. The relic fell to the floor, cracked and smoldering. The voice collapsed beside it, his iron mask split open. Beneath it was no face, only darkness that seemed to breathe. "We have been blessed," he rasped. "But the gods demand more." I looked around. Half the cult lay dead, or worse. Lauren was kneeling near the pit, staring into nothing, his skin crawling with symbols that writhed like maggots. I could still feel the thing's gaze in my skull, faint but constant. It was inside me now, a seed, planted in the garden of my thoughts. I knew it would grow. That night, I returned to my hab. The city felt different, quieter, as though it, too, had heard the gods. I washed the blood from my hands, but the mark on my arm burned brighter. When I tried to sleep, the whispers returned. But they no longer asked if I wished to be free. They said, "You are chosen. Now, make others see." The next day, the first manufactorum explosion was reported in District 9. Official records would call it sabotage by malcontents. But I knew better. It was revelation spreading. The weeks after the revelation night bled together in fever and silence. The hive had changed. I could feel it. The vents breathed slower, The power grids groaned with strain, and the Vox channels carried whispers instead of orders. Something vast had moved beneath the metal skin of the city, and everyone felt its presence without understanding it. At first, the Adeptus Arbites came in force. Entire blocks were sealed, workers questioned, and habs purged. But their authority meant nothing in the Underhive. The voice had vanished, leaving only his relics and the words he had carved into our minds. Faith spreads faster than fire. He was right. Every night, more people disappeared from their shifts, not to flee, but to join. Lauren and I became messengers, guiding new believers into the forgotten tunnels. I had never led anyone before, yet when I spoke, they listened. They saw the mark beneath my sleeve, the faint pulse of red that throbbed when I spoke of liberation. It wasn't charisma. It was connection. The gods were speaking through me now, but it wasn't all revelation. With every sermon whispered in the dark, with every secret meeting by flickering lumen light, the hive seemed to decay further. Lights flickered more often. The hum of the manufactorums faltered, and sometimes, just before the power died, I swore I heard a heartbeat pulsing in the walls, slow, heavy, watching. The other workers whispered about it too. They said the machines had begun to dream. I thought it was metaphor. Then, one shift, I saw proof. I was repairing a conveyor cogitator when the metal beneath my hands moved. Not by mechanics or malfunction, it flexed like flesh, groaning softly, as if drawing breath. My fellow laborer, an older man named Harvek, noticed nothing. When I stepped back in horror, the machine stilled, frozen as before. I didn't report it. The Imperium doesn't tolerate questions. And I already knew the answer. The hive was no longer a machine. It was alive. That night, Lauren came to me in secret. His eyes were shadowed, his voice hoarse. The voice has returned, he said. He's calling for the faithful. The Arbites are burning the tunnels, but he says we must not run. He says the gods have chosen this hive as a cradle. A cradle. The word struck something deep and cold within me. We followed him through the ruins of the lower sectors, moving past barricades and abandoned shrines. The further we went, the louder the hum became. That same pulse I had felt in the metal. The air shimmered faintly, as if reality itself was sweating. And there, in the heart of the Underhive, stood the voice. He was changed. His robe hung in tatters, his body wreathed in a faint red glow. His mask was gone, and his face was wrong. Not monstrous, not yet, but too fluid. His features shifted subtly as he spoke, as though his flesh could no longer remember what it was supposed to be. The Imperium burns our faith, he said softly, his voice echoing without air. They will come for us soon. But this is what the gods desired. Through fire, we will ascend. He raised the cracked relic. Its light pulsed in rhythm with the hive's heartbeat. For an instant, I saw the city itself responding, power conduits flashing in sequence, the very walls breathing in time. The voice turned his gaze upon me. You hear it, don't you? He asked. The song beneath the metal. The machine is awakening. I nodded slowly. I didn't know whether it was madness or revelation, but the line between them no longer mattered. The Arbites are coming, he continued. Let them. We shall meet them not with fear, but with faith. And when they strike us down, the hive will answer. He smiled, a thin, impossible smile that never reached his eyes. The gods have whispered to me, child. Death is not the end. It is the beginning. As he spoke, the walls trembled. Machinery screamed from miles above. And through the Vox static, a single voice cut through, a panicked broadcast from the upper levels. This is command. We've lost containment in subsector 12. Repeat, containment breach. Then silence. The voice spread his arms. They call it containment. We call it birth. Lauren fell to his knees in worship. I didn't move. I just listened to the hive's breathing, to the rhythm of metal and faith becoming one. For the first time, I felt fear not of punishment, but of what would happen if the song stopped. Because deep down, I knew the hive wasn't awakening. It was becoming something else. The purge began at dawn. The Arbites descended from the upper levels like a storm of iron and flame. Sirens howled through the hive spires as fire teams swept the manufactorums. Vox amplified commands echoing across the smog-choked corridors. They came armed with suppression shields, flammers, and righteousness, the kind that burns everything it touches. From my station on the lower platform, I saw the first strike unfold. A column of smoke rose from District 12, black as the Emperor's mercy. Workers screamed as fire licked across the habs. The air smelled of promethium and fear. I should have run. Every sane man would have. But sanity had long since fled Hive Calthor. The whispers in my head had grown stronger, not one voice now, but many, layered and discordant, urging patience. Let them come. Let them see. By the time I reached the tunnels, the air was already thick with heat and ash. The cultists had gathered again, hundreds of them packed into the dripping dark. They carried makeshift weapons, hammers, knives, broken pipes, and their faces were painted with soot and faith. The voice stood at the front, illuminated by the glow of a single lumen suspended above him. His robes were gone. He wore the rust-red armor of a fallen enforcer, stripped of insignia. Across his chest, the 8-pointed star burned faintly. Not carved or painted, but grown. "Brothers and sisters," he said, voice calm amidst the chaos. "The Emperor's hounds believe they bring justice. But justice has no meaning to the forgotten. Today, we show them the truth." He gestured, and a group of us stepped forward, those marked by the relic, those who had touched the god's reflection. We knelt, and he placed his hands upon our brows one by one, whispering words that weren't entirely human. When he touched me, I felt the world bend. The hum of the hive became a roar. My vision flickered, steel and fire, light and shadow merging. I saw the tunnels stretch like veins beneath the city, alive and pulsing. I saw the Arbites moving above us, ignorant of how close they were to something ancient and patient. "The gods do not need armies," he said. "They need believers." Then the explosions began. The Arbites had reached the Underhive's outer rings. We could hear their boots pounding through the corridors, hear the hiss of igniting promethium. Flames devoured everything they touched, machines, idols, people. The air turned crimson with reflected light. But as the fire spread, something answered. The metal walls pulsed again, once, twice, and the flame bent. It didn't extinguish. It simply turned. The promethium burned backward along the pipes, racing toward the Arbites instead of away. Screams followed. The hive itself was fighting back. The voice lifted his arms, triumphant. "Do you see? Even the metal knows who its master." A nearby cultist fell to his knees, laughing and sobbing. "It's alive," he gasped. "The hive lives." The Vox systems crackled to life, broadcasting panic transmissions. "All units, fall back." Unknown phenomena detected in the rest dissolved into static. The voice looked to us. "Now you understand. The Emperor's realm is rust and lies. The gods offer creation, even in destruction." Through the smoke, I caught sight of movement. The first Arbites pushing into the tunnels, visors glowing red. They raised their flammers. I expected the voice to order an attack, but instead he simply said, "Kneel." We obeyed. The first jets of fire roared down the passage, engulfing the front line of cultists. I flinched, but the flames stopped short, hanging midair, trembling as though confused. Then, impossibly, they reversed. The Arbites screamed as their own fire turned upon them. Their armor blackened, their visors shattered, their prayers drowned in static. When the last echo died, the voice lowered his arms. "The gods defend their children," he murmured. But I saw the cost. The air shimmered faintly where the fire had touched, not from heat, but from something unseen pressing through the thin skin of reality. The smell of ozone was thick, and beneath it, something sweet, rotting alive. The survivors cheered. Lauren clutched my shoulder, eyes bright with madness. "We're chosen," he said. "The gods walk with us now." I wanted to believe him, but as I looked at the place where the Arbites had burned, I saw shadows that moved without light, shapes crawling just out of sight, drawn to the blood and the faith that fed them. That night, the voice declared the first victory of the faithful. The hive's upper levels burned, but the underhive sang. We chanted until the echoes carried through the pipes, a single word, over and over, vibrating through steel and flesh alike. Ascension. We emerged from the tunnels 3 days later. Or maybe 3 weeks. Time meant little in the dark. The fires above had dimmed, replaced by a choking pall of ash that filtered through the hive's broken lungs. The upper spires were silent now, the Vox channels dead except for static. We'd won nothing. The Emperor's servants had burned, yes, but so had everything else. The manufactorums were gone, The habs crumbled. Whole districts collapsed into the underhive like corpses sinking into the earth. The city wasn't dying, it was already dead. And then, the voice returned. He had vanished during the purge, leaving only silence and fear. Many whispered that he'd been taken by the Arbites, or that the gods had devoured him for failure. Some of the faithful had begun to fracture, forming smaller sects. Each claiming to serve a different name whispered in the dark, Blood Father, Plague Lord, Serpent Queen. But when he came back, the schisms ended instantly. We found him standing in the ruins of the shrine, where molten steel had cooled into jagged, unnatural shapes. He was changed. His eyes were gone, replaced by swirling pits of light that hurt to look at. His voice, once smooth and human, now carried echoes, like multiple beings speaking through one mouth. "The gods have spoken," he said. No one dared breathe. "They have shown me the path beyond this carcass of a hive, beyond the Emperor's lies. They have given us purpose." Someone, a woman whose name I no longer remember, whispered, "What did they show you, Master?" He smiled, and the scars around his mouth split open like petals. "They showed me the end, and the beginning." He raised his hand, revealing the relic, the same we had bled to earn. But now it pulsed like a living heart, slick with dark ichor. The air around it shimmered, and the ground beneath him trembled as if the hive itself remembered something ancient. Lauren fell to his knees. "You walked the warp," he breathed. "You saw them." "I did," the voice said. "And they saw you." He stepped closer, pressing the relic to Lauren's chest. I expected fire or agony, but instead, light poured through him, not golden or holy, but crimson, shifting, infinite. Lauren screamed, his body twisting, stretching. When the glow faded, he was kneeling in the dust, gasping, alive, but changed. His eyes burned faintly red, his voice deeper, echoing faintly as he spoke. "The gods, they live inside us." That night, the voice gathered us around a map scorched into the metal floor, an outline of the hive's foundations. He traced a path downward with his finger. "We go deeper. The surface is lost, but below the hive lies a truth buried since the age of strife. The gods hunger for it to be found." I remember feeling both fear and exhilaration. The Arbites had failed to destroy us. The hive itself seemed to bow before our faith. And now, the promise of revelation lay below, in the abyss where no imperial citizen dared tread. We packed what little we had: rations, weapons, tattered banners. The relic we carried in a sealed casket that never stopped pulsing. Every heartbeat it gave off seemed to echo inside my skull. Before we descended, I found myself staring at the ruins one last time. The hive had been my prison, my home, my world. Now it was nothing but ash and ghosts. The voice placed a hand on my shoulder. "Do not mourn the corpse," he said softly. "Rejoice for the birth that follows." And then he smiled, though his teeth looked less like bone and more like something grown from a wound. We went down. The tunnels narrowed, turned slick and warm. Strange fungi grew on the walls, glowing faintly with bioluminescence. The air was humid, almost alive. Every step felt like walking through a long. After hours, or days, we reached what the voice called the wound of the machine. A vast chasm, filled with mist and the faint hum of ancient power. Old imperial tech lined the walls, forgotten conduits, reactors, and catwalks eaten away by time. "This is where they first touched us," the voice said. "When men reached for the stars, and the warp answered." He turned to me. "You have been faithful, brother. You will see the truth before the others." I didn't know whether to feel honored or terrified. That night, as I slept near the relic, I dreamed of something vast and watching. It whispered to me not with words, but with understanding. It promised power, purpose, perfection. When I woke, I was still hearing it. It was no longer in the relic. It was inside me. We followed the voice into the depths. Through the labyrinth were the hives. Heartbeat faded into the distant hum of ancient machinery. Down there, light was a luxury. The glow of our torches barely reached the walls, and the air felt thick with memory, old oil, stale dust, and something else. Something alive. The deeper we went, the more the hive changed. Pipes no longer carried water or power. They pulsed, faintly, as though veins beneath a skin of steel. The walls sweated condensation that shimmered like blood under our lamps. It was as if the city itself was being remade, metal bending. reshaping under unseen hands. The voice told us this was the will of the gods, that the hive was being reborn just as we were. Some of the others began to chant, praising their unseen masters. But I noticed things the others didn't. Faces forming briefly in the condensation, eyes blinking within rusted walls, whispers that grew louder when you tried to ignore them. Lauren was the first to change. He'd been strong once, a laborer, his muscles corded from years in the manufactorum, but now, his flesh rippled like something beneath it wanted out. His voice had gained a strange resonance, every word a faint echo of another language. He claimed the gods were reshaping him for glory. The voice encouraged it. Do not fear the touch of divinity, he told us. Fear only being ignored. But I did fear it, because every time I looked at Lauren, I saw less of the man I'd known and more of the thing he was becoming. One night, as we rested near an ancient power conduit, I woke to find him standing over me, his skin glowing faintly from within. He smiled, or at least tried to, but his mouth didn't move right anymore. They speak to me, he whispered. They want to speak to you too. Before I could respond, the ground shuddered. The entire tunnel vibrated, dust falling from the ceiling in waves. Somewhere deeper below, something massive was moving. The voice raised his hands, and the quake stopped as abruptly as it began. His eyes burned with unnatural light. It stirs, he said. The heart of this world has heard our prayers. We marched on, crossing bridges that hung over bottomless pits, passing relics of forgotten technology. At one point, we found a chamber of enormous gears and pistons, all still slowly turning though no power fed them. The voice called it the pulse of the machine god's corpse. By then, the changes among us were impossible to ignore. Skin turned pale or cracked like stone. Some grew vestigial limbs. Others coughed up black fluid that steamed as it hit the floor. The voice said these were signs of blessing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being digested. The relic pulsed more violently now, its rhythm aligning with our hearts. Every beat seemed to sink us closer to it, as though it were rewriting the tempo of our lives. When we finally stopped to rest, I tried to sleep, but dreams no longer came. Only visions. Endless corridors, shapes crawling through them, eyes blooming open in the dark. And always a whisper that said, deeper. The next morning, one of the younger cultists, a girl barely past adolescence, collapsed mid-step. Her body convulsed, then melted like wax, leaving behind a wet silhouette that pulsed once and sank into the floor. The others didn't stop walking. They simply whispered prayers. I asked the voice what was happening to us. He regarded me with something that might have been pity or amusement. You asked what it is like to serve the gods. This is your answer. To be remade. But what if I don't want to be remade? I asked. He leaned close, his breath hot and metallic. Then you will be forgotten. And there is no hell worse than being ignored by the divine. That night, I found Lauren staring at his reflection in a pool of condensed moisture. He touched his face, or what was left of it, and began to laugh. A wet, choking sound. They're inside everything, he said. The walls, the air, even us. Don't you see? We're already part of them. For a moment, I almost believed him. The air shimmered faintly, shapes shifting in the darkness, tendrils, silhouettes, fragments of impossible color. The warp was bleeding through. And still, the voice led us onward, into the maw of the hive's dying heart. We had become more than human, and less. The tunnels widened until they became caverns. The air vibrated with a constant metallic hum. When the first gunfire echoed through the depths, we thought it was another quake. But then came the unmistakable thump of heavy bolters, the scream of lost fire. The barked orders of soldiers who still believed the Emperor watched them. The Astra Militarum had come to reclaim Hive Calthor. We saw the first of their lights cutting through the ash, disciplined columns, Vox units on their backs, armor marked with the sigil of the 88th Calthoran Regiment. They moved like a single machine, practiced and precise. For a heartbeat, I envied them. Their unity, their purpose, their clarity. Then the voice raised his hand, and the relic at his belt answered with a low, throbbing note. Let the faithful greet them, he said. The assault that followed was chaos in every sense. We had no formations, no ranks, only devotion. The guardsmen had flammers, grenade launchers, and the courage of drilled obedience. We had desperation and the whispers of gods. The first volley tore through our front line. I watched men I'd prayed beside fall in neat rows. Holes punched through them so cleanly that smoke still curled from their armor. But they didn't stay down. The relic pulsed again, faster. The fallen began to twitch, bones snapping into new shapes. Their wounds didn't close, they rearranged. Flesh flowed where it shouldn't, forming jagged limbs, new mouths. The guardsmen hesitated just long enough for the voice to shout, "Forward!" I charged with the others. The sound was deafening, lost fire slamming into the walls, grenades bursting, the air stinking of ozone and burning oil. I swung a length of rebar like a blade, striking a trooper across the helmet. He fell, visor shattered. I saw his eyes, terrified, human, still trying to understand what we were. For an instant, I almost dropped the weapon. Then he reached for his sidearm, and I didn't hesitate again. The voice strode through it all untouched, each step rippling the ground. Bolter shells curved away from him, melting before impact. He pointed toward the command squad, and the relic shuddered with a noise too deep to be sound. The soldiers around the commander simply dissolved into mist. Across the Vox, the guards shouted for reinforcements, for artillery. Their discipline held, but the hive itself was turning traitor. Lights failed, doors sealed. Bulkheads screamed as gears locked into impossible configurations. The machine spirit no longer answered the Emperor, it answered something else. We pressed the advantage, but victory was an illusion. For every guardsman that fell, 10 more followed. Their tanks pushed through collapsed streets, turrets grinding. The heat of their plasma fire burned even through the lower levels. The voice's laughter echoed through the ruins. "Let them come," he said. "Let them feed the transformation." By nightfall, if such a word still meant anything underground, the hive was a battlefield of shrieking metal and collapsing faith. Civilians who'd hidden in the ruins joined us, driven mad by fear, believing any power that could fight the Imperium must be divine. The air reeked of promethium and blood. I fought until my arms trembled. Between bursts of noise, I heard myself whispering prayers I didn't remember learning. The relic's pulse matched my heartbeat. Its rhythm was mine. In the brief silences between gunfire, I thought I could hear the gods breathing through me. When the guard finally withdrew to regroup, the voice stood amid the wreckage and raised his hands to the smoke-filled sky. "Do you see?" he called. "Even the might of the Imperium bleeds before our faith." The survivors cheered, but their voices were warped, layered. Some no longer spoke in any language I knew. Lauren approached me, half his face a mask of fused metal, eyes glowing faintly from within. "We're winning," he said, and for a heartbeat I almost believed him. Then I looked at the city, buildings half melted, air thick with the stink of burning souls, and wondered what winning meant anymore. When the smoke cleared, the hive was silent again. A silence too thick to be natural, one that carried weight, like the city itself was holding its breath. We had driven the guard back to the upper tiers, but the cost was everything. The tunnels were choked with bodies, the air so heavy with iron it hurt to breathe. I stood among the wreckage and realized that the faces around me were no longer those of men and women. They were masks of faith, skin stretched thin over devotion and hunger. The voice moved through the aftermath like a priest at an altar. Every step left a faint scorch on the ground, the relic at his side pulsing steadily. He spoke of victory, of divine purpose, but his words echoed through the metal like thunder without meaning. I watched him and wondered if he even remembered what we had once been. Workers, dreamers, victims. Now we were weapons. That night, he summoned me to the old Magrail terminal that had become our shrine. Candles burned in the grooves of ancient tracks. The smell of oil and blood hung in the air. The relic rested on a pedestal of fused steel, its heartbeat loud enough to feel in my bones. "You've been faithful," the voice said, stepping close. "And the gods have seen you." He held out his hand. "Take it. Let in my stead when I ascend." I hesitated. The relic's light spilled across my skin like liquid fire. "Why me?" "Because you still question," he said softly. "And faith that survives doubt burns brightest." His words filled me with equal parts pride and dread. I reached out. The surface of the relic was warm, almost soft, and beneath it, I felt something move. A thought pressed into mine, too vast to understand, whispering in a language that tasted of copper and ozone. My vision fractured. I saw the hive not as a city, but as a living organism, arteries of tunnels, Lungs of smoke, bones of steel. I saw it breathing. Then the relic's pulse matched mine exactly. When I withdrew my hand, I could still feel it beating in my chest. I looked at the voice, and for a moment, I thought I saw fear in his eyes. The next day, the war began again. The guard had regrouped. Their artillery fell like thunder from above, tearing through the upper halves, collapsing entire sectors into the underhive. The air shimmered with static. Vox signals bled together. Amid the chaos, I heard the gods' voices clearly for the first time. Not words, intentions. Hunger, joy, expectation. We fought like possessed things. Every blow landed with purpose not our own. The voice walked among us, but I led the charge. The relic's rhythm pounded in my skull, pushing me forward even as exhaustion clawed at my limbs. I remember striking down a guardsman and seeing my reflection in his visor. Not a man, but something half-formed, half-born. Faith and madness had become the same act. By the time the fighting stopped, the hive was a ruin of fire and echo. The guard retreated again, but there was no triumph in it, only emptiness. As I stood among the broken walls, I felt the relic call, not from the pedestal where it had rested, but from within me, each heartbeat a summons. I could sense the warp's edge bleeding closer, reality stretching thin like wax under flame. The others seemed to feel it too. Some fell to their knees, weeping in ecstasy. Others tore at their flesh, trying to carve symbols that glowed faintly even in darkness. Lauren approached, his form barely human now. He touched my shoulder, his hand leaving a faint burn. "You lead them well," he rasped. "They see the gods in you." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was terrified, that every prayer I spoke felt like a lie. But the relic pulsed again, and the words never came. The voice watched from the shadows, smiling. "The gods reward the devoted," he said. "You'll see soon enough." And I realized that the war outside wasn't the true battle. The real war was inside us, between what remained human and what was already gone. I began to lose count of the days. The sun never reached us. Time was measured only in the pulse of the relic and the rhythm of battle. The guards' bombardments became distant thunder, background, noise to our new existence. In the dark, something else was growing. It started with dreams. I would see flashes of light beneath my skin, veins glowing faintly like circuitry. I'd hear voices whispering in sync with my breathing, as if my lungs had learned to pray on their own. When I awoke, I'd find faint marks, patterns that looked like runes, etched into my arms, pulsing softly before fading. The voice called these signs of favor. The others called them the proof. I called them what they were, warnings. But faith leaves little room for fear. We gathered in the central atrium of the collapsed hive. What had once been a cargo exchange now turned temple. The walls were lined with scavenged banners daubed in blood and oil. At the center stood the relic, its light stronger than ever, pulsing in time with the trembling floor. The voice raised his arms. "The moment of ascension approaches. The veil thins. You, my chosen, are no longer bound by the lies of flesh." He gestured to me. "Behold the living proof." Every gaze turned toward me. I felt the relic's pulse match my heartbeat again, then surpass it, forcing my chest to rise and fall in rhythm with something beyond myself. The air thickened. Motes of red light drifted from nowhere. A faint ringing filled my ears, growing louder until it became a single, endless note. And then the relic answered. It lifted from the pedestal, weightless, spinning slowly in the air. Lines of light spread outward from it, crawling along the floor like veins of molten gold that turned red as they grew. They reached me. I fell to my knees. The world dissolved into heat and vibration, every nerve lit with fire. I felt my body stretching, twisting, then reforming, more solid than before. The pain should have been unbearable, but it wasn't pain anymore. It was revelation. When my vision cleared, the voice was watching me, not smiling, studying. "Do you feel it?" he asked. "I do." I managed, my voice a whisper that echoed twice. "But what am I?" He stepped closer, touching my chest where the relic's glow still pulsed beneath the skin. "You are what faith makes of flesh. The god's reflection." I wanted to believe him. I wanted it to mean something noble. But in that moment, I saw what the others could not. The relic wasn't giving. It was feeding, drawing strength from every prayer, every death, every drop of blood spilled in its name. And it was using me as its conduit. Over the next few days, my body continued to change. My senses sharpened. I could hear the tremor of gears kilometers away, smell promethium leaks before they ignited. I could also hear the whispers more clearly. Not words, emotions. Hunger, delight, expectation. I became the voice's weapon. Wherever he pointed, the relic's power flowed through me. I could twist steel, melt barriers, silence Vox signals with a thought. The faithful followed me as if I were a prophet. But inside, a growing dread festered. The relic spoke more frequently now, not to the voice, but to me. It showed me flashes of what waited beyond the veil. Oceans of living fire. Forms that shifted with thought, eyes that saw through time. They called me vessel. One night, I asked the voice what it meant. He regarded me in silence for a long time before answering. Every vessel must be poured out, he said. When the gods arrive in full, they will need form. You will give it to them. The realization hit like a bolt round to the gut. I wasn't chosen. I was a container. Still, I couldn't stop. The power was too much, the pull too strong. I told myself it was destiny, that I was serving something greater. But deep down, I knew the truth. Faith had become infection, and I was its carrier. Lauren watched me change with reverence and fear. You'll lead us into the new dawn, he said, his voice a rasp of broken metal. I nodded, but I didn't believe in dawn anymore. Only the endless red horizon of the warp, waiting to swallow us all. The relic pulsed again, stronger than ever. Its voice inside my head whispered one word: soon. They came at dawn, or what passed for dawn beneath the hive's shattered skin. The vox crackled first, static, then a chant in a language I didn't recognize. The voice froze mid-sentence, eyes wide as the relic shuddered against his chest. Brothers, he murmured, our prayers have been heard. From the shadows of the collapsed transit tunnels, they emerged, giants in crimson armor, their steps shaking the metal beneath them. Sigils burned on their pauldrons, scriptures carved into their skin and armor both. Acolytes of chaos, but not like us. These were true believers, space marines of the word-bearers legion. The dark apostle leading them carried a crozius that blazed with unholy light. His armor was older than our entire hive, inscribed with runes that pulsed in time with the relic's heartbeat. When he spoke, it wasn't with one voice but with many, each one layered and resonant, as though the gods themselves whispered through him. Children, he said, you have stirred the warp. The gods are pleased. The voice fell to his knees. We have built this shrine in their honor, my lord. We have bled, burned, and broken in their name. The apostle's gaze drifted over us, expression unreadable behind his helm. You have done well. But devotion without direction is chaos without purpose. His words carried weight. Even the relic dimmed in deference. Then he turned to me. And you, he said, you carry the mark. I could feel his attention pressing against my skull like a physical force. The relic pulsed faster in my chest. Silence. He raised a hand. A ripple of power passed through the air, and every lesser cultist dropped to their knees. The apostle stepped closer, towering over me. I could see my reflection in the eye lenses of his helm, distorted, flickering. You are the vessel. The gods whisper through you. I can hear them. Behind him, the word-bearers formed a semicircle, chanting softly. The air thickened. The walls themselves began to hum. I felt the relic answering, reaching out to them as though recognizing kin. The voice tried to speak, but the apostle silenced him with a single glance. You, he said coldly, were a placeholder. The true communion begins now. Two of the Marines moved forward, gripping the voice by the arms. He didn't resist, only stared at me with something between awe and hatred. Don't forget who showed you the way, he hissed. Don't forget. The apostle raised his crozius and brought it down. The voice's words ended in a flash of crimson light. The impact left no blood, only ash. I wanted to move, to scream, but I couldn't. The apostle turned back to me. You are free of false leadership. The gods have chosen their conduit. He gestured to the relic. The time of revelation is now. The relic tore itself from my chest, floating between us. Its light grew unbearable, filling the chamber. I saw the Marines bow their heads, murmuring praises. The apostle spread his arms wide, his voice rising over the hum of the warp. Through this vessel, we open the path. Through faith and blood, the veil shall part. The relic split apart midair, revealing within it a swirling vortex of red and gold. The sound that followed was not noise, but understanding. A single word made of infinite voices. The walls around us bent inward. The air turned liquid. Reality itself began to fold. Lauren reached for me, but his hand disintegrated into motes of light. The cultists screamed as the warp bled through, reshaping them into things of faith and nightmare. The apostles' chant grew louder. And through it all, I heard the gods whisper in my mind, "Vessel, open the way." Something inside me broke loose. My body burned, but there was no pain, only purpose. I felt the warp pushing through me, infinite and hungry. The relic's pieces embedded themselves into my flesh, fusing bone and light. When I looked up, the apostle was watching, his expression hidden behind his helm, but his voice trembling with reverence. Yes, yes, the gods are pleased. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that what was coming wasn't blessing but annihilation, but the words dissolved before they left my mouth. I wasn't sure I still had one. Section 13. Reality didn't so much shatter as it came apart like wet parchment, layers peeling back to reveal the madness beneath. The warp wasn't a place. It was a thought that had learned how to scream. The chamber dissolved into crimson fog, the ground replaced by shifting fragments of memory, echoes of the hive, broken prayers, faces of the dead. The word-bearers stood unmoving in formation, their chants unbroken even as the air bled light. They had seen this before. They had wanted this. And I, vessel, conduit, prisoner, was at the center of it all. The relic within me pulsed so violently it felt as if it were trying to tear its way free again. Every beat spread ripples through the warp storm, bending the world to its rhythm. Shapes flickered in and out of sight, tendrils of molten light. Eyes opening on nothing, fragments of the god's attention drifting closer. The apostle raised his crozius high. The veil is torn. Behold, the truth of divine chaos. His voice echoed in a dozen directions at once, each word stretching longer than sound should. Around him, the cultists who hadn't already perished began to dissolve into energy, faithful offerings. Absorbed by the warp storm, the word-bearers stood untouched, their armor glowing faintly with runes of protection. Through the maelstrom, I could feel everything. The hive's ruins above us, the guard battalions encircling the city, even the orbital bombardments being prepared in orbit. Every pulse of energy, every breath, every flicker of human terror. The warp fed on it all, and I was its conduit. Then came the realization, something else was pushing back. A second pulse, colder, more disciplined. A presence that cut through the storm like a blade through silk. I turned my eyes upward and saw a lance of light pierce the heavens. It wasn't warp fire. It was the light of the Emperor. A ship, imperial, massive, ancient, had entered orbit, and its arrival burned through the storm like holy fire. The apostle staggered, his voice faltering. No, not now. Not yet. He turned to me, fury radiating like heat. Hold the gate open, vessel. The ritual is incomplete. I tried. Throne, I tried. The relic screamed within me, flooding every nerve with power. But the Emperor's light was stronger. It burned through the warp storm, severing threads, silencing voices. The chamber's walls, whatever they had become, began to fracture under the opposing forces. The word-bearers roared in defiance, unleashing torrents of warp energy into the portal. But for every ounce of corruption they conjured, the Emperor's light countered with cleansing flame. The warp buckled. The ground twisted. The apostle reached for me one last time. And then everything exploded. Silence followed, deep and total. When I woke, I was lying in ash. The world was quiet, save for the faint ticking of cooling metal. The portal was gone. The relic, gone. The word-bearers, gone. Only fragments of armor and scorched scripture remained. Lauren lay nearby, somehow alive, his body half encased in glass from the heat. His eyes met mine. We did it. He croaked. I looked around. The hive's foundations had collapsed into a crater miles wide. Nothing remained but ruin and echoes. No, I said. We stopped it. He laughed weakly. Then we saved the world. I shook my head. No one's ever saved in the 41st millennium. We just delay the end. Far above, the Imperial ship still burned bright in the sky, purging the last of the warp traces with holy light. But I knew better. The warp never leaves empty-handed. Something had passed through before the gate closed. Something small. Something alive. It whispered in my head now, faint as a heartbeat. Vessel, not finished. The days after the collapse bled together, measured not in hours, but in how long the silence could hold. Before the whispers returned, Imperial forces swept through the ruins soon after. Valkyrie gunships scoured the crater, their searchlights cutting through drifting ash. Auspex scanners hummed over the wreckage, seeking survivors or heresy both. They found plenty of the first and far too much of the second. I hid among the corpses, too weak to move. Lauren had not survived the second sunrise. His laughter had turned to a wet rasp before he finally stopped breathing. I buried him with my hands, though the ash kept swallowing what little I could build. It didn't matter. Nothing did. When the guard patrols finally reached me, I didn't resist. I looked like any other burned refugee, clothes charred, voice gone, eyes hollow. They scanned me for taint and found nothing. The relic had vanished without trace, leaving no mark for their sensors to find. I was taken to a Medicae outpost on the edge of the city. The priest there spoke kindly, though I could tell he was afraid of everyone. He asked where I had come from, what I had seen. I told him a simple lie, that I was a worker caught in a munitions blast. He nodded, wrote it down, and never asked again. The Imperium thrives on incomplete truths. Weeks passed. The city began to rebuild under watch of the Inquisition. Rumors spread of a chaos incursion repelled by orbital fire, of entire regiments lost to friendly bombardment. The word bearers were not mentioned. Neither was the relic. History in the Imperium is curated by survival, and we were not supposed to survive. At night, I dreamed. Always the same dream. Red light pulsing beneath my skin. Whispers threading through my veins. The relic had gone. Yes, but not completely. It had left something inside me, a fragment that hummed when I prayed. The first time it answered, I nearly screamed. I was kneeling before a shrine cog in the refugee camp, reciting the Imperial Creed, when the words twisted. Not aloud, but inside my skull. Faith is just obedience, vessel. You can shape it as you wish. I clenched my fists. No, I whispered. I'm done. The whisper didn't argue. It only laughed, a low, patient sound. The following day, a commissar visited the camp to inspect for potential heretics. He questioned each of us, eyes sharp, hand never far from his bolt pistol. When he reached me, something inside me stirred. The whisper rose again. Show him faith. I felt warmth build beneath my ribs, the relic's echo, answering my heartbeat. It wanted to reach out. For one moment, I let it. The commissar stopped mid-sentence. His eyes glazed for half a heartbeat. Then he shook his head and moved on without another word. He didn't mark my name. He didn't see me again. That night, the whisper purred. Even the faithful can be guided. I wanted to end it. I wanted silence. But every time I tried to drown it out, I felt the pulse grow stronger. It wasn't corruption, not entirely. It felt like possibility. Power waiting for shape. And I hated that part of me still wanted it. Soon, others began to notice. People in the camp would gather near me when I spoke. They said my words gave them courage, that my prayers sounded truer than the priest's. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I told them to keep faith, to endure, to serve the Emperor. But deep inside, I wondered who I was really serving now. The whisper never told me. It didn't have to. As weeks turned to months, the camps emptied. I was relocated to a manufacturum hab block, assigned to work detail under Mechanicus oversight. Routine replaced thought. Days passed in haze. But at night, when I looked at the reflection in the oil-slick windows, I saw the faintest glow beneath my skin. Red, subtle, waiting. And each time I blinked, I swore I saw another shape behind my reflection, something vast, patient and smiling. The relic was gone, but its faith remained. The years since the fall of the hive blurred into service and silence. I learned how to look loyal, how to sound obedient. The Imperium prizes those who labor and never question. I excelled at both. The manufacturum was endless noise. Pistons, vents, the rhythmic scream of forges. I wore the gray robes of a menial, my hands calloused from wiring lossbacks and bolter feeds. The air tasted of ash and oil, comforting in its constancy. But beneath it, the hum remained. It was part of me now, steady as a heartbeat, patient as decay. Once, a preacher came through the line, shouting verses over the roar of machines. He spoke of redemption, of cleansing flame, of a galaxy united under the Emperor's gaze. I felt the whisper stir, amused. So many words. So little understanding. I shut my eyes. Not now, I whispered under the machine's drone. Always now, it replied, gentle, persuasive. Faith doesn't vanish. It changes. A klaxon blared. A worker had collapsed from exhaustion. The overseers dragged him away without a glance. I returned to work, trying to lose myself in repetition. But that night, as I lay in my cot, I felt the hum again, stronger this time. And something else. It wasn't speaking to me anymore. It was calling through me. I dreamt of the relic, whole again, orbiting above a blackened world. I saw the word bearers returning, their ships bleeding warp light. And in the center of it all, a single spark, me. A beacon. The fragment of the relic pulsed in time with my dream. My breath matched it. When I awoke, my cot was glowing faintly, just enough that I could see the symbol forming in the dust beneath my fingers. I wiped it away before anyone saw, but the lines remained burned into my vision. That day, the Inquisition came. An agent of the Ordo Hereticus arrived unannounced, flanked by stormtroopers. They questioned the overseers, inspected our work, then began scanning the workers. One by one, the Auspec's lights flickered green. When it reached me, the whisper fell silent. For a heartbeat, I thought it was over. Then the Auspecs began to scream. The agent's eyes widened. The stormtroopers raised their weapons. Heretic taint detected. Contain the subject. The whisper laughed. Finally, the world turned white. When the light cleared, the manufactorum was gone, vaporized in a wash of warp energy. The troopers were ash, the agent a statue of glass mid-command. I stood in the center, untouched. Smoke rose from the floor in the shape of wings. I felt no fear, only understanding. The relic's fragment pulsed once more, slow and certain. It had been waiting, learning, hiding within me until I could no longer deny what I'd become. Not a servant, not a vessel, a seed. The whisper spoke again, calm as ever. Faith spreads. You are the beginning. I walked into the ash storms outside, the sky still burning from orbital fire. Around me, the city trembled with the sound of sirens and prayers. None of it mattered. The warp was listening again, waiting. I closed my eyes and whispered the same word the relic had taught me years ago. Soon. There are no true endings in the 41st millennium, only transformations. The story of the cultist is not one of redemption or defeat, but inevitability. In a galaxy where every prayer is answered by something listening in the void, faith itself becomes a weapon, a contagion, a whisper that spreads long after the speaker is gone. The Imperium will rebuild the hive. New workers will fill the manufactorums. Preachers will speak of loyalty and vigilance. And somewhere in that crowd, someone will feel a warmth beneath their skin, a pulse that doesn't match their heartbeat, a voice too soft to hear but too strong to ignore. Because corruption in Warhammer 40K is never just physical, it's belief twisted by desperation. Every cultist begins as someone who wanted meaning in a universe that offers none. Every relic is simply a mirror that reflects the hunger inside. Then began scanning the workers. One by one, the Auspec's lights flickered green. When it reached me, the whisper fell silent. For a heartbeat, I thought it was over. Then the Auspecs began to scream. The agent's eyes widened. The stormtroopers raised their weapons. Heretic taint detected. Contain the subject. The whisper laughed. Finally, the world turned white. When the light cleared, the manufactorum was gone, vaporized in a wash of warp energy. The troopers were ash, the agent a statue of glass mid-command. I stood in the center, untouched. Smoke rose from the floor in the shape of wings. I felt no fear, only understanding. The relic's fragment pulsed once more, slow and certain. It had been waiting, learning, hiding within me until I could no longer deny what I'd become. Not a servant, not a vessel, a seed. The whisper spoke again, calm as ever. Faith spreads. You are the beginning. I walked into the ash storms outside, the sky still burning from orbital fire. Around me, the city trembled with the sound of sirens and prayers. None of it mattered. The warp was listening again, waiting. I closed my eyes and whispered the same word the relic had taught me years ago. Soon. There are no true endings in the 41st millennium, only transformations. The story of the cultist is not one of redemption or defeat, but inevitability. In a galaxy where every prayer is answered by something listening in the void, faith itself becomes a weapon, a contagion, a whisper that spreads long after the speaker is gone. The Imperium will rebuild the hive. New workers will fill the manufactorums. Preachers will speak of loyalty and vigilance. And somewhere in that crowd, someone will feel a warmth beneath their skin, a pulse that doesn't match their heartbeat, a voice too soft to hear but too strong to ignore. Because corruption in Warhammer 40K is never just physical, it's belief twisted by desperation. Every cultist begins as someone who wanted meaning in a universe that offers none. Every relic is simply a mirror that reflects the hunger inside. Perhaps that's why the gods never die, because mortals keep giving them shape. So remember, listener, in the dark millennium, faith is never free. Every devotion costs something, and the warp always collects its due. Whether you worship the Emperor or the ruinous powers, you're only ever a vessel for something larger, and the galaxy turns on the faith of those who dare to believe.